Right here.
There it is, right.
Okay, thank you. Greg, you've brought us a huge amount of information today. And I wasn't sure what I was going to do at the wrap-up. Take what you talked about and apply it to the Ontario situation. But we'll try and cover a little bit of it. I would say that about 99% of what you've heard today works in Ontario. The one advantage we have is in 2013 we only had about 2 days over 30 degrees Celsius, which in your terms is about 90. And we get better rainfall in the summer than you do. We still have a drought period in August, but our drought period is it hasn't rained for 3 or 4 weeks. And in that time frame, the temperature was never more than 90 degrees. So that's our unfair advantage over you. Your winters are a little milder than what we get generally. So I'm going to talk a little, and the other thing while I think of it, Greg talked about body condition score on cows. You talked about 6.25, 6.5, and then 5. The United States works on a system out of 10, we work out of 5. So our body condition score at 2.5 means trouble is standing at the door. Body condition score of 3.25 is where we like to be. So it's just get the scale right. I agree 100% with what you're talking about. So just keep that in mind. We use a 5 system, so 2.5 is look for more feed.
Okay. You don't go to 10?
No, we go to 5.
Okay. You said 3.25, I'm like, ooh.
3.25 for us is 6.5 for you.
Gotcha.
Okay, cool. Cattle and sheep, yes. So, the key point of keeping your pastures healthy. This is the one that I think is key. The condition of the pasture when your livestock leaves the pasture is the key to keeping your pastures healthy. So what do you leave behind? It's not what the pasture was like when you went in, but what was it like when you pulled the cattle out? Grass is a solar panel, sunlight drives photosynthesis, the leaves are the manufacturing plant, so to speak. The sunlight's free, maximize its use on your farm. Bare ground doesn't give you any solar panel. Dead material doesn't give you any solar panel. The leaves work in conjunction with the roots. The roots provide nutrients and moisture. The leaves take the sunlight and through photosynthesis give us the energy. So we want to have a maximum of healthy plants on our field. We've got 2 pastures here. The one on your left, very short, lots of dead material, bare ground there. There isn't very much there. And that great big red knife that's there as a marker is this one. Now there's about ½ inch of grass. It's likely about 50%, well, I'm being generous, maybe 40% green leaf material, all baby leaves. The rest is dead material, bare ground. The pasture on the right, lots of growth, good color to it, legumes in it. When an animal takes a bite, they're going to get a good amount of feed of high nutritional value. Just the seasonal distribution of pasture options that we have. This light green line is our grass legume mixtures we tend to use. So that's our cool season grasses, our clovers, our trefoils, our alfalfas. Start the growth in sometime in April, late April. We get great production through May, June, drops off a bit in July and August, and then a bit of a blip here in September, and then by this time of the year, growth is pretty much stopped. the native plant species, and we tend not to have a lot of those in southern Ontario grazing, but we get a good start in the spring and then they drop off dramatically in the summer. The blue line that I've got there is annual forages, and they can supplement very effectively in our forage program. Sometime we can get a little bit out here in April with cereal rye, winter rye, but from late June through until October, November, we can use those annuals to complement the other species that we've got. And then stockpile pasture to take us into the winter, and then with that we've got the opportunity of grazing residues and bale grazing to take that season on farther. But this growth pattern is what you're working with as you work through it. So to make a system work really well, we need a good perimeter fence so that you're not worrying where your animals are and you can focus on the grazing management. An internal fence, and Greg's talked about this. Keep it simple. It's your key to livestock management. Having that fence so that you can easily move animals where you need them. Single or double wire electric allows you to control where they are. Get your animals controlled to electric fence. It's a once-in-a-lifetime memorable experience when you touch it. Anything less is just goofing around. I talk to people that say, oh, I got 2,000 volts on the fence. Well, if all's well, 2,000 will work. But if there's something on the other side that looks intriguing, or life here isn't very good, they're gone. So lots of charge on the fence and well-grounded. Take the water to the livestock, not the livestock to the water. Keep it fairly close to your paddocks so they drink individually. You need a smaller water trough. Keep the water fresh. I like to see, if at all possible, that the water be pumped so that we keep it clean, we keep it fresh, whether it comes from a pond and surface water or whether it's well water. Keep it in the field. If they have a long ways to walk for water, they get to the water trough, they're going to go as a group, then they hang around the water trough, they talk to each other, they tell stories, they're not eating grass and gaining, then they lay down, they get up, they poop, they pee. Fertilizing the water trough generally is not very profitable, so keep them out in the field. And I like to think of a pasture as managing a feed bunk. And when we manage a feed bunk, we have fresh feed in that bunk, we have the right texture, the right length to that feed, it's nutrient balanced, easy access. Think of the pasture in the same way. We want fresh feed, we want a texture and a length that the animal can eat. And thinking of cattle, a cow's mouth is about the same as your hand. They've got 4 teeth to bite with against a hard palate. So your hand, like I'm holding it here, is an upside down cow's mouth. And they have no knife and fork to pull stuff in with, it's just what they can grab in a bite. So if we give them grass that's this high, they're just nibbling away and they never get filled up. If we give them grass that's really tall, they can't tear it off, and if they do get a piece torn off, they stand there and chew on it to get it into their mouth. A cow eats more or less 25,000 bites a day. Your control factor is how big that bite is. They're just nibbling, they get 25 nibbles, they don't get the feed intake that they need. So we want to give them as big a bite as we can. And just on grass density and vigor, these are some sort of Ontario numbers, rough idea, and I've done this example with sheep, but if you take sheep numbers and divide by 7, you end up with cows. So if we've got 300 pounds of dry matter per acre inch of height, so on an acre, each inch of height, it's 300 pounds of dry matter. That's really good grass. 6 inches of growth that we're going to harvest. So we want the grass about 10, 12 inches high. We're going to take it down to about 4 inches. 6 inches will give us 1,800 pounds of dry matter. If we're feeding our sheep 5 pounds of dry matter per ewe per day, 3.5% of body weight, what we're offering, we can feed 360 ewes per acre per day on that pasture. So I'm talking really good quality pasture, 360 ewes per day. If it's poor quality pasture and there's only 100 pounds of dry matter per acre inch, and again we've got that 6 inches we're going to harvest, then we've only got 600 pounds of dry matter. We can feed 120 ewes per acre, or we need 3 acres to feed that same number of ewes. And if we've got poor quality short pasture, only 3 inches high, or 3 inches that we're going to take, it's 6 inches high, we're going to take it down to 3, 100 pounds of dry matter, we need 6 acres for our same 360 ewes. So it's that quality of pasture and productivity that we can get from it. We also then can have high stocking rates, we have greater high stocking densities, we can get more animal impact on that pasture. And now's a good time for a couple of my really high-tech crops. For grazing in southern Ontario, keep holding the mic down. This is my high-tech grazing tool, a 2-liter pop bottle. We want the animals to go in when the grass is the height of the pop bottle, so about 12 inches high. We want them out when the grass is the height of the pop bottle laying on its side, so about 4 inches high. So if you watch the bargains at the grocery store, you can pick one of these up filled with sugar water for about 75 to 90 cents, and you've got a measurement tool. If we get the grass shorter than about this height, then we end up with bare ground, and we deplete the root reserves of the grass. The grass above ground is a mirror image of the root system below ground. I've got a slide in here at some point on that. We'll get to it, I guess. So we want to keep a good root system so that when we get warm, dry weather, we've got roots in moisture, the roots grow to moisture. If you can't afford a high-tech pop bottle, this is tool number 2, pair of rubber boots. When you walk in the pasture field in the morning and your pant legs get wet above the rubber boots, the grass is high enough to get in there and graze it. If just your toes get wet, it's time to get out. So everybody on a farm has a pair of these, and just a simple measurement way of doing things. That's a little shorter height than what Greg's been talking about, but what I see in my travels here in southern Ontario, and we're mainly working with cool season grasses and clovers and some alfalfas, those heights work pretty close as a rough guideline. We want good soil fertility. Hungry plants, like hungry livestock, don't grow very well. So do a soil test every 3 or 4 years so that you've got a benchmark. You want a pH of 6.5 or higher. And in most cases in Ontario, that's not a big problem, but once in a while we get into some pockets of low pH. We want a phosphorus soil test of 12 to 20 parts per million. That's with the sodium bicarbonate test, and potassium of about 120 to 150 parts per million. So those are medium soil test results, and if we need that fertility there, whether it comes from commercial fertilizer, ideally it comes from good soil microbial activity and organic matter. You can build it up that way, but we need good fertility to grow a good crop. Compost and manure, use it widely and get it evenly distributed across the field. That's why we want high stock densities. And think in your nutrient cycling, about 80% of the nutrients stay on the pasture. We lose about 20% of them into the environment and to the animal growth and animal production. If you've got an old grass stand, then you need to get get some extra nitrogen into it, the best way is to get legumes into that stand. 35–40% legume content will give you the nitrogen to keep the grasses growing and give you a good quality ration. If you don't have legumes, then you're going to get a response to commercial fertilizer in the rate, and put it on at a 40 to 50 pounds of actual N per acre. If you put on less than that, you don't get any more than a green response from the grass. If you put on more than that, the grass in that growth cycle can't utilize it. So 40 to 50 pounds of nitrogen, but ideally 35–40% legume content in your pastures, and you don't need to add any additional nitrogen. Frequent moves is the key to healthy pastures. So rest and recovery, reduce tramping and wastage, increase intakes, and allow adequate time to recover. And that recovery time is so important. In that, reducing tramping and wastage, get your stock densities up fairly high. And Greg talked about 100,000 pounds per acre, and I don't very often see that here in Ontario, and there's no reason why we can't go there. Does anybody know what 100,000 pounds of animal per acre looks like? I want you to, Greg does, Tony does. I want you to take a look around this room for a minute. Just guess the size, gauge the size of the room. Done a few calculations today. How many cows, my cows weigh 1,250 pounds. How many cows can I put in this room for one day to have 100,000 pounds of stock density per acre? Any guesses? 50? No, you're way too high. 25, you're still high. I think the room's 100 by 75 feet, is my guesstimate. 15 cows. Or, the other way I figured it out, if there was about 100 people here, and if the average weight was 175 pounds, that would give us that stocking rate in here. So if we were a bunch of small calves at 175 pounds, all of us have to get our 24 hours of feed inside these 4 walls. So maybe that'll help you visualize it. So I've talked about including legumes. Most of the time we're working with cool season grasses. I'm a big fan of orchard grass because it regrows quickly, starts early in the spring, is the most productive of the grasses that we have. But in an established pasture, work with the grasses you've got. Make sure you've got some legume in there to help promote good growth. Alfalfa, white clover, trefoil, and red clover would be the main legumes to work with. And the clovers and the trefoil likely work the best in most cases in pastures, although I think there is a place for alfalfa. And here's where I like alfalfa. This was 2012, August 17th, a dry year. That's second growth. The alfalfa's done well. The grasses and the dandelions didn't do much at all after first cut. And that's where alfalfa shines. It's got a deep root system, and it can work quite well in a grazing system if it's properly managed and gives you that summer growth that we don't always get with the cool season grasses. Grass growth, we start out really small here, the small plant, low yield, high quality, and as the plant grows, we get high yield and low quality. And we want to harvest in this area right in here, which is when the plant is actively growing, likely at the boot stage or just head emerged on the grasses. If we go much beyond that, we get into more mature and the digestibility drops off. We also have a plant that's growing rapidly, has replenished its root reserves, and so will regrow once it's been grazed off. Just a schematic here, and I've touched on this, but the root depth is a mirror image of the grass growth above. If we've got deeper roots, then when the soil gets warm and drier, the roots go down farther and get more moisture. If you want to if the roots are shallow, then you're not going to get the growth in the summertime. And the example I use to work this in reverse, if you're in charge of cutting the grass at your home, about the end of June, chop it down really, really short. Like cut it ½ an inch high. You will get yelled at for 2 or 3 days, but that'll go away. And you won't have to cut grass for the rest of the summer. So why would you graze your pastures down the end of June to ½ an inch high? You know, it just doesn't make any sense. So keep a good root system, keep good top growth. Grass needs rest and recovery time, so graze for 1 to 2 days, then allow adequate rest 30, 40, 45, 50 days. Depends on the species, depends on conditions. Maintain at least 3 or 4 inches of residual there, along with what you've tramped down. Rotation is the key to a successful system. Get in, harvest it, get out, and leave enough behind to regrow. Calculate your feed needs, number of animals in each category, feed requirements for the pasture season, and length of the grazing season. So you've got to figure all of that out going into the season, because you're matching 2 dynamic systems. You've got the livestock that need feed, you've got the grass that's growing. In a stored feed system, we already know how much stored feed we've got. The silo's so full, we've got so many bales, etc. In pasture, you're trying to grow feed as you need it. So you need to budget what you need and calculate how much is available in your pastures. Do some yield estimates. And one of the simple ways to do that, I've been doing a project the last couple of years where we're measuring yield in pastures, and I made this little square, another high-tech, high-priced piece of equipment, a 1x3 and 8 screw nails. Should come in under $2.25 if you don't count your labor building it. This is 18 inches by 18 inches, which represents 2 1/4 square feet. You can use any size you want, hula hoop, bigger. I wouldn't go much smaller because you want a representative sample. Harvest the grass by hand or with a set of shears, and then weigh off, put it in a plastic bag, take it into the house and weigh it on a set of kitchen scales, gram scales. Figure out how much you've got. You can get more sophisticated and try and dry that grass and get a better estimate, but most of the time grass is about 20% dry matter as it's growing, unless it's a really wet season or really dry conditions. So weigh it off, figure it out, do a little bit of math so that you've got an idea how much feed you've got there. We get about 60% of our grass growth in May and June, and we get the other 40% over the next 4 months, from July through October. So we've got that tremendous flush at the beginning of the season. We need to manage that so that we can carry on right through the year, or through to the end of the growing season. So you're going to leave more stuff behind in May and June, more residual, so that you can have it there to pick up in July, August, September, October, etc. And I would suggest that you use a grazing wedge as a measurement of pasture yield. Measure the available pasture in each paddock every couple of weeks. Graph the results to see if something is out of line, and respond when and where needed. So here's a graph. For this purposes, I've used a 12 paddock system. So in paddock number 12, the cattle have just come out, and I've got, this is ewe days per acre. I've got about 50 ewe days per acre of forage in the paddock I came out of. I've got about 750 in number 1 paddock that I'm going into. And so in every 2-week interval, figuring out how much forage is in each paddock gives you an idea of where you're at. In this example, these two paddocks have gotten more forage than what I would have expected. So what do I do about that? Do I graze them earlier? Can I put a little higher stocking density? Each situation will give you something to work around. Here's another example. In July, we've got some paddocks that aren't where we expected them, so we're going to have to adjust our management. This gives us a chance looking ahead and figuring out what we need to do, rather than saying, oh my goodness, I've got no pasture left, what will I do? There's not much you can do when you've got nothing left. Add into the perennial pastures the opportunity to use annuals. It gives you a chance to rest your perennial pastures. Midsummer to fall is when you can make use of these. You need to plan ahead. It takes about 50 to 75 days after planting to get anything to work with, to get enough growth. And they're certainly less expensive than stored feed. Some examples: winter cereals for early spring grazing, spring cereals, oats planted after a wheat crop for fall grazing. I think we have a tremendous opportunity with corn to plug in some holes. Sorghum Sudan grass for midsummer, brassicas, the turnips and the kales and the rapes for midsummer to late fall. Figure out your feed requirements so that you know what you're going to need going down the road. And I would suggest you have a perimeter fence or the makings of a perimeter fence on all of your fields.
5 minutes, Jack.
5, okay? That perimeter fence or the corner post for a perimeter fence gives you an opportunity to quickly fence a field that you can then graze. Just a schematic showing when some of the annuals are available, and it's basically late summer and early fall that we can get the feed from those. Stockpiling perennial pastures for grazing in late October into November and December. Tall fescue and trefoil work the best. They hold up their quality quite well after frost, whereas something like orchard grass, once it gets a hard frost, turns to mush, not palatable and not much there for them. The leathery leaf of tall fescue does stand up well and works very well in that type of situation. And fertilize it, promote the growth, and it's going to have to grow from mid-July or late July through the fall to have any quantity there later in the season. The other opportunity we have in extending the grazing season is crop residues. Corn stover in particular is an excellent feed source for pregnant beef cows. About a month's feed on an acre of corn stover for a cow is a rough guideline. So that can extend your grazing season fairly well. And we've got lots of corn in southern Ontario that can work well in that situation. And again, perimeter fence. If you've got 4 corner posts, you can string up some wire pretty quickly. So, got a list here of things. Call it a good plan. A is the best plan B. Proper planning at the beginning of the grazing season should allow you to meet your needs throughout the season. Failing to plan is planning to fail. Waiting until you're out of pasture leaves no options but to use stored feed. And stored feed is twice the cost of pasture. Keep a reserve of feed available, not a big reserve, but a small one. Custom graze part of your flock if you run out of feed. Call early and call hard. Keep your pastures subdivided. Small areas, you're going to get by far the best results. Body condition score and adjust the feed. We want animals in that our body condition score of 2.5 to 3 in most cases. Water in each paddock, frost seed, overseed, and reseed as needed. Fertilize, get the fertility up in the pastures, whether you do that by bale grazing or fertilizer. Lots of legume in the pasture. Use annuals. Stockpile perennial pastures. Graze rough lands, roadsides. Be innovative. I've seen some people grazing roadsides the last few years. 2012, when it was dry, people ran out of feed. They got a little bit innovative. Those animals can make use of any green forage material that's out there. So look around and see where your opportunities are. Second growth in hayfields is another place to pick up late summer pasture. Don't start too early in the spring. If you start early in the spring, then you're going to set those plants back and they're going to be slow for the rest of the year. There's a line or a phrase, a day in the spring is worth 3 in the fall. And if you get out too early, then you're just not going to get the growth for the rest of the year. And again, adequate rest and recovery. So plan for productive pastures. And every once in a while I get a call, a comment, there was a run-out hayfield, so I turned the sheep in. Well, if it wasn't good enough for a hayfield, it's not really good enough for a pasture field. Don't sell your pastures short. Strong, healthy forage plants will give your pastures the resilience that you need them to have to provide for your livestock. Just measuring, keep some records, keep some notes so you know what's happened year to year and when it's happened. Overseeding to add legumes to the pasture. I would not overseed grasses in most cases. Overseed the legumes and work with the grasses that are there. And graze that pasture really short this fall to frost seed the coming spring, so that there's minimal competition for the seed once it gets going. Keeping pastures healthy, capture the sunlight with green healthy plants, fence to provide livestock management, so no longer than 1 or 2 days on a paddock, water readily available, high stock density and frequent moves, legumes and grasses, both in your pasture, adequate fertility, use annual stockpiled forage and crop residues to your advantage. Keep your pasture records and information so you know what you're working with. Also keep track of rainfall records. Rest and recovery is the key. And the condition of the pasture when your livestock leaves is the key to keeping pastures healthy. And just some references I've got there. So, Sean?
Thank you, Jack. So, something we do on our farm that we found that's been really cost effective is we cash crop and have beef cows, but we try not to dedicate any good acres to our beef cows, and we try to run 70 to 80 beef cows. And we plant a lot of fall rye most falls. This fall's been a challenge because it's been so wet. We put a lot of fall rye out. It's cheap to buy the seed, very inexpensive. It's good for the soil. We take a cut of that silage. You just can't cut it early enough in the spring. One day it's a foot, the next day it's 3 feet tall. Like, it just grows unbelievable. And we cut that stuff with a hay vine. We silage bale it up, and it's cheap feed. And the cows do well on it. They really like it. And then we can go in there and plant corn or soybeans after and not lose any acres. And so I know there's a lot of people in Waterloo County who have started to do that on very expensive farmland. And we found it's worked really well. And we got a 4-wheeler, and we put a couple pounds an acre on every spring of white Dutch clover. And I mean, it's just an excellent thing for keeping the weeds out of the pasture and keeping things growing. And I appreciate what Greg shared today. We'd really like to do a lot more pasture management with cattle on our farm. And so I really appreciate what I heard today. It's some good ideas. I think some new ideas and fresh ideas for us here today. Appreciate that. We're going to take 6 questions. I just get Greg and Jack and Ruth to come forward, and they have 1 minute to answer them. So that means you only have 1 minute to ask them. So if you have a question, I want you to stand up so everybody can hear it, and we're going to make this really quick. Does anybody have a question? Yes?
Greg, you talked about measuring the soil fungi.
Yeah, we are working with Dr. Langham on studying the life in the soil. And what we found out was a lot of cool season pastures that don't have the warm season grasses in them are bacteria dominant. There's tons of bacteria and not even mycorrhizal fungi. where we have the warm season grasses, we actually found mycorrhizal fungi. So I think what Elaine has done with all her studies, and she's done it in Australia, the United States, New Zealand, she's finding a real lack of fungi in the soil. And so I feel like through her results, we need more fungi in the soil. And the only way to get that is to put it in there. And so we're looking at a compost extract of actually spraying it, injecting it into the soil behind the key line, plow. We have a yeoman plow that we're going to borrow from a neighbor and actually inject it down below the hard bed. So this thing has 4 sheeters on it. We're going to bust through the hard band, mount a barrel to it, and actually put the fungi down under the hard band.
What's the name of that lab?
Molly Haviland is the gal that's doing the the soil life test for us. Haviland, Haviland. Molly's a student under Dr. Elaine Ingham, and she'll do a soil test on your farm for $30. And what that'll come back, it'll show you the bacteria, the fungi, the nematodes, the good guys, the bad guys, what's happening in your soil life. It's not going to tell you anything about the phosphorus or the nitrogen or any of that. It's just all the life in the soil. And it's all done with a microscope.
We have another question?
Do you want to address it?
You get something to add?
I just wanted to, I guess I could add that as opposed to trying to determine exactly which bacteria or fungi in the soil, I'm working with Grazing Laboratory to use the biological respiration as an indication of what actual biological activity is occurring. So just working through that and testing that out, see how that measures up.
Was there another question? Yes.
Yes, you mentioned that you're doing workshops on your farm for pasture management in Maine. Is that open to Canadians by any chance?
Yep. The question was on the workshops we do on our farm thing every year. Yeah, we have a Canadian down this year. It's open to anybody who wants to come.
We had
Is this
a,
on your website?
Yep.
we had a New Zealander. I mean, yeah, we'll let anybody come.
That's great.
Jason.
Doors are open.